The mountains groaned with silence, the kind that pressed down like a weight, broken only by the sudden crack of gunfire tearing across the ridgeline. Lieutenant Robert Hayes slammed into the frozen dirt, face scraping against jagged stone, as shards sprayed from the impact of incoming rounds. His breath clouded in the bitter air, every exhale a pale ghost rising in the fog. For 3 endless days, his 4-man team had been stranded in this merciless wilderness. The extraction bird that was meant to whisk them home had gone down miles short of the landing zone, coughing smoke into the night sky before vanishing in fire. With the helicopter destroyed, every escape route had closed like jaws around them. Now, hemmed in by steep stone cliffs and a mist that cut visibility to arm's length, they were prey in a cage built by the earth itself. And the hunters had arrived. Rounds snapped through the air, chewing bark from frozen stumps and ringing against the rocks. The enemy had the high ground, and Robert knew from experience what that meant. Every shadow above them might conceal a barrel, every patch of darkness a trigger finger waiting to squeeze. His team's magazines were nearly empty, their strength dwindling with each hour. No backup, no rescue, no comms reaching beyond the mountain walls. Only 4 soldiers in a shallow depression, surrounded on all sides. Then came the voice, through the broken static of his radio. Calm and steady, a woman spoke as if she stood right beside him. "If you move now, you'll be dead in 7 seconds." Robert froze, heart slamming against his ribs. His eyes darted to his team. Emma, the sharpshooter, already prone with her rifle braced. Michael, the youngest, teeth gritted as he fought to steady his weapon. John, a veteran of too many fights, crouched low, whispering curses under his breath. None of them had spoken. None of them had touched the comm, yet the voice was there, cutting clean through the chaos. 3 seconds ticked past. The only sound was the wind sliding over the ridge like a blade. On the 6th second, a single gunshot cracked through the fog. Sharp, precise, final. Somewhere in the distance, an enemy rifle fell silent. Robert's pulse thundered in his ears. He didn't know who she was, or how she saw what none of them could. But one fact was undeniable. Someone out there was watching, guiding them with a steady hand. 72 hours earlier, it had all begun with fire. Their mission had been simple on paper: secure an asset and prepare for extraction. But in the Black Ridge Mountains, nothing was simple. The terrain was a labyrinth of jagged stone, narrow gullies that carried sound for miles, and steep cliffs that made every step a gamble. When their helicopter sputtered out and went down short of the pickup zone, their map became useless. The night had swallowed them, and the enemy owned the ground. Fog drifted into the valley like a living thing, damp and suffocating. It muffled their footsteps, but it also muffled sight. Visibility dropped to mere meters. Even their night optics seemed blind, blurred by the mist. And with each hour, the cold dug deeper, gnawing into muscle and bone. Breath froze against skin. Fingers stiffened around weapons. Sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford. The ambush had come swift and merciless. Bullets hissed past Robert's head, sparks dancing from rock as his team dove for cover. Emma scanned with her scope, her voice clipped over comms. "Multiple positions. They're waiting for us to move." Muzzle flashes burned against the fog, here and gone in bursts of orange. Michael muttered under his breath, pressing tight to the stone. "Ammo won't last long." He was right. Their pouches were light, each round precious, and the enemy knew it. Robert had tried the radio then, desperation tightening his voice. "Any station, this is Sabre 6 Alpha. Requesting immediate assistance, grid 42.89, north 109.27. We are taking heavy fire." Only static answered. He tried again. Nothing. The silence that followed pressed heavier than the fog itself. Pinned down, outnumbered, outgunned. It was the kind of fight that ended in silence and unmarked graves. That was when John spoke in a low voice, as if sharing a secret no one wanted to believe. "You ever hear about the Phantom Sniper?" Robert shot him a sharp glance. "Not the time." "Maybe not. But they say she shows up when the odds are impossible. A ghost with a rifle." Robert had no use for ghost stories, not when survival demanded steel and skill. But the thought lingered, like smoke refusing to clear. And then, as if summoned from that very rumor, The radio came alive with that voice, calm, commanding, unshaken. Hostiles at bearing 045, 400 meters, elevated behind the split boulder. Secondary group at 315, using the dead tree for cover. Robert's blood ran cold. Whoever she was, she had eyes sharper than their scopes, seeing through mist and shadow as if it weren't there. Training screamed at him not to trust an unknown operator. But then Emma whispered, breathless, "She's right. I can see it now. She's dead on." 3 sets of eyes turned to him, waiting for his choice. Robert drew in a long breath. "Overwatch," he said into the mic. "We're listening." The ghost had entered the fight. The silence after Robert's words seemed heavier than the fog itself. For a moment, the only sounds were shallow breaths, the tick of safety catches being adjusted, and the distant whisper of the wind carrying snow across stone. Then her voice returned, calm and sharp, as if it cut straight through the mist. "First bound. Emma, move northeast 20 meters, toward the horseshoe rocks. Robert, lay suppressing fire. Michael, hold position until I call you." The tone was confident, precise, leaving no room for argument. It carried the weight of someone who had given these orders 100 times before and lived to see them carried out. Robert hesitated for a heartbeat. Every part of his training screamed against trusting an unknown voice, but every part of his instinct told him that hesitation would get them killed. "Go," he barked. Emma broke from cover, boots crunching on frozen shale as she sprinted toward the shadow of jagged rocks. Tracers stitched the fog around her, red and green lines flashing past like vengeful spirits. Robert squeezed his trigger, rifle kicking against his shoulder as he poured fire into the glowing muzzle flashes. Then another shot, distant and unfamiliar, cut the night. One enemy weapon fell silent. Emma dove behind the rocks intact, gasping into her mic, "I'm good. Position secure." The voice came again without pause. "Next. John, 15 meters south, toward the fallen log. Route is clear. Move now." John vaulted forward, low to the ground. Another crack rang out. Not from Robert, not from Emma. It came from a completely different angle, as though a second sniper had joined the fight. Robert blinked. Whoever she wasn't just firing. She was orchestrating. Every shot was deliberate, clearing the path before his men moved, shaping the battlefield like an artist with a brush. Michael muttered under his breath, all mixing with fear. She's carving us a way out." Robert kept his rifle steady, providing cover as John slid into place. His doubts began to dissolve. Whoever this Overwatch was, she wasn't guessing. She was everywhere at once, cutting away threats in the exact order they needed to move. "Third bound. Robert, you're up." The words chilled him. He was the last to break cover. Emma and John laid down bursts of suppressing fire, muzzle flashes searing brief holes in the fog. Robert sprang forward, boots slipping on gravel, round sparking against the stone just inches away. Then silence. Another phantom shot echoed through the valley, and the enemy fire from that direction ceased. By the time Robert dove into the shallow gap beside Emma, his doubts were gone. "Overwatch," he said into the comm. "Voice steady now, you lead. We follow." There was no reply, just the next comm command. "Advance. Stay low. Pace your fire." They moved in rhythm, guided by a ghost. Each time danger reared its head, her rifle spoke first. Robert glimpsed one of her shots through his scope, a gunner tucked half-hidden behind a shattered tree, no more than a sliver of shoulder exposed. Wind gusted hard across the ridge, enough to throw any normal shooter's aim wide. But she didn't wait for perfect conditions. She fired once. The threat collapsed. Every shot carried purpose. Every kill brought them a step closer to survival. Then the night changed. A sharp, distant flash cut the fog, not aimed at them, but somewhere else. Robert's gut twisted with recognition. "Sniper," he warned into the comms. "He's not after us. He's hunting her." The voice remained steady. "Hold positions. I'm going to introduce myself." Seconds dragged like hours. Then her rifle barked, not at the enemy, but into a patch of bare rock halfway between. The shot echoed differently, misplaced on purpose. Robert's stomach knotted. Bait. The counter-sniper took it. His return fire lit the mist for half a heartbeat, a crack of light revealing his hidden nest. That was all she needed. Her next round landed with surgical precision, silencing him before he could chamber another. "Threat neutralized," she said simply. "Resume advance." Robert exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His team looked at him, faces pale but burning with something new, hope. The valley narrowed as they pushed forward, Stonewall Ridge looming ahead like an ancient fortress. Jagged walls rose high, offering natural cover on three sides. For the first time in hours, Robert thought they might actually make it. He slid behind a boulder, chest heaving, lungs burning from the sprint. "We made it," he whispered. But the voice returned, stripping away that fragile relief. "Negative. 30 hostiles converging from 3 directions. Estimated time to contact 12 minutes. The words hit like ice water down his spine. 30 enemies, closing fast. No air support. For rifles. 1 phantom sniper. Then a faint tone pulsed in his ear. A timer she had set herself. Cold, merciless, counting down the minutes. "We hold here," she said, as calm as if she were giving weather reports. "And we make them regret it." No one argued. The seconds bled away. Each tick was another heartbeat in the frozen dark, another shallow breath that might be their last. Robert checked his weapon, then looked at Emma, at Michael, at John. No words were needed. The bond between them was wordless, soldiers who had fought too long and too hard to flinch now. The timer clicked down from 12. "First target, heavy weapons crew," Overwatch ordered. Through the mist, Robert spotted a faint shimmer of movement, an enemy dragging a belt-fed monster into position. If that weapon set up, their cover would be shredded in seconds. One shot cut through the valley. The gunner jerked backward, collapsing into the snow. The assistant froze, abandoned the weapon, and vanished into the fog. 11 minutes remained. Her voice never wavered. "Next, command element." Robert scanned until he caught sight of him. A man standing tall, hand signals flashing to squads. Even through fog and cold, leadership carried itself differently. Another crack. Another silhouette dropped. 10 minutes. The ghost was still with them. The clock in Robert's ear ticked on, every beat pressing harder against his chest. 10 minutes left. 10 minutes until 30 enemies reached their position. The fog coiled thicker around the ridge, swallowing the world into a shifting sea of gray. The air carried the smell of wet stone, burned powder, and fear. Overwatch's voice slid through the static like steel against glass. "Communications, bearing 285. Take it down." Robert raised his binoculars and saw it. The faint shadow of an antenna peeking above a boulder. An operator crouched low, whispering into his mic. Before Robert could adjust his aim, her rifle cracked. The antenna toppled sideways, the man's body slumping against the rock. "Comms silenced," she said flatly. 9 minutes. Enemy fire chewed at the boulder shielding Robert, shards of stone spraying across his cheek. He ducked low, teeth clenched. John's voice shouted through the comms. "West flank. 2 moving fast." Robert twisted in time to see shapes darting low, hugging the terrain. He and Emma opened fire, slowing them but not stopping them. The enemies pressed closer, shadows with rifles slipping through the mist. "Demo specialist, South Ridge." Overwatch cut in. Robert's stomach dropped. He spotted him, a bulky pack strapped across his shoulders. Explosives. If that man reached the ridge, they would lose their only fortress. Then the Phantom's rifle spoke. The figure dropped mid-stride, the pack spilling into the snow. 8 minutes. But the threat didn't end. More shadows appeared, moving in disciplined lines. Robert's pulse hammered. There were too many, too fast. Then came the worst surprise yet. A squad that had slipped close, only 80 meters out, their outlines suddenly materializing from blind ground. Robert swung his rifle, but his angle was wrong. He cursed under his breath. The squad would overrun them. "Hold!" Overwatch's voice came, almost soft. Her rifle cracked once. The bullet threaded through a split no wider than a hand span between slabs of granite. The lead soldier dropped mid-step, collapsing into the man behind him. The rest broke in confusion, scattering into the rocks. 7 minutes. The fog thickened further, smothering sight until even 10 meters felt like an eternity. Somewhere out there, dozens of enemies were closing in. Their footsteps crunched faintly, whispers carried by the wind. Moving target, 2250 meters, heading east. Overwatch called. Robert could hear her breathing over the comms, slow, steady, perfectly controlled. He imagined her scope fogging at the edges, the wind tugging at the barrel of her rifle. She wasn't just shooting. She was counting her own heartbeats, timing the squeeze of the trigger with each pulse. A shot cracked across the valley. A distant figure folded into the earth. 6 minutes. Enemy fire faltered. Robert risked a glance over the ridge. What he saw sent a flicker of disbelief through his chest. The neat, disciplined lines of the enemy advance had begun to unravel. Groups pulled back, moving irregularly, no longer confident. "They're breaking," Emma said, disbelief sharp in her voice. John grinned through the grime, teeth white against the darkness. "Guess Ghosts put in overtime." But Robert wasn't ready to believe they were safe. The seconds on that invisible clock still drained away, each one dragging them closer to whatever storm was coming. Then the assault resumed, heavier than before. Grenades thudded against the ground, shrapnel tearing into stone. Robert ducked, ears ringing as fragments hissed past. "Command element, second wave." Overwatch's voice cut in. Through the fog, Robert spotted him, another figure standing tall, his presence like a shadow guiding the squads forward. Her rifle cracked. He dropped instantly, his men faltering, formation breaking once more. 5 minutes. The valley echoed with chaos now, bursts of fire, shouts in a language Robert couldn't place, the constant whisper of bullets through the fog. His hands were numb, fingers raw from the cold and the rifle's kick. Emma called targets through clenched teeth. Michael reloaded with trembling hands. John roared curses at enemies they could barely see. Still, Overwatch's voice remained level, anchoring them. "East slope. Rock outcrop. 3 hostiles." Robert pivoted, aimed, fired. His rounds found flesh. A scream cut short. "West approach. Low ground. 2 crawling." Emma shifted, her rifle spitting sharp bursts. Shadows collapsed into the mist. For minutes, the clock's ticking felt louder now, as if it were inside Robert's head, counting down his very breaths. He tried not to think about it. He tried to focus only on her voice, each order like a lifeline dragging them through the storm. Then silence. Not from her, but from the battlefield. The enemy's fire thinned, the shouts grew fewer. Robert risked a glance again, and this time he saw it clearly. The enemy was retreating, pulling back into the fog, abandoning bodies and weapons in the snow. "They're falling back," John whispered. Emma exhaled hard, shaking her head. That's not possible." But it was. The 30 who had come with confidence had been cut apart, scattered by one ghostly rifle and 4 weary soldiers who refused to die. Overwatch's voice returned, calm as ever. "Clear to hold. They won't be back soon." Robert swallowed, keyed his mic. "Overwatch, you saved 4 lives tonight. We owe you." The reply was as cold as the wind. "Ghosts don't stay for parties." The line went silent. Robert stared into the fog where her shots had come from, knowing in his bones she was already gone. The timer clicked to 0, and the battlefield was theirs. Dawn crept slowly over Stonewall Ridge, a thin blade of pale gold cutting through the remnants of fog. The battlefield lay quiet now, almost innocent, stripped of the violence that had raged through the night. Frost glittered on the rocks. The snow was stained dark in places where men had fallen, but otherwise the world seemed as silent and untouched as before. Robert Hayes leaned against the boulder that had been his cover for hours, body aching, chest heavy with exhaustion. He had survived missions before, but this one carried a weight unlike any other. He felt it in his bones, in the silence that followed. Someone had made the impossible possible. Emma crouched near the base of a rock, gloved hand brushing across the ground. "Sir," she called softly. When Robert turned, she held up something she had found in the dirt. It was a patch. Silver and black threads formed the image of a coiled viper with outstretched wings. There were no numbers, no unit designation, no official mark. Yet Robert recognized it instantly. His breath caught. Phantom unit, he whispered. John stared at it for a long moment, face unreadable. So the stories were true, he muttered. She was right here with us. Michael reached for the patch, but Robert took it first, sliding it carefully into the pocket of his vest. His voice was low, steady. This doesn't leave us. Not now. Not ever. The distant thump of rotor blades broke the moment. Their extraction bird had finally arrived, descending through the thinning fog. None of them spoke as they gathered their gear. The rest of the exfil was quiet, each man and woman lost in thought, trying to process what had just happened. Back at base, the official debriefing unfolded like all the others. Questions from officers, clipped answers from the team, every detail logged with military precision. Yet Robert knew better than to mention the voice on the comms. Some truths were too fragile, too dangerous, to hand over to people who would bury them under paperwork in silence. Still, the mystery gnawed at him. He couldn't let it rest. So when the debrief ended, Robert didn't return to his bunk. Instead, he began digging. Not through official channels. They would only lead to locked doors and classified dead ends, but through favors, through whispers, through men and women who owed him answers from missions past. The same names surfaced again and again. Alexandra Rains. No official record tied her to any active roster. No rank listed. No deployments acknowledged. Just whispers. A sniper whose missions were wiped from existence after a classified operation had gone catastrophically wrong. Some said she had died in country. Her body never recovered. Others claimed she had walked away before command could bury her in a court-martial. The stories varied, but one detail was consistent. Her skill with a rifle was unmatched. Shots no one else could make. A calm that never cracked under fire. A ghost behind the scope. Robert spent weeks pulling at the threads, each one leading him deeper into shadows. Sabre 6 rotated through new assignments, but the memory of that night at Stonewall Ridge lingered in his mind like an unfinished sentence. Then one afternoon, John stormed into the ready room, a tablet clutched in his hand. His eyes were wide, his voice urgent. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen was an article. A new treatment center for special operations veterans battling PTSD. Fully funded for 5 years. The donor anonymous. But the location struck Robert like a blow. A rural property in Montana. Land that once belonged to Alexandra Rains. He read the lines twice, feeling the connection click into place. It was her. It had to be. John wasn't finished. He tapped the screen again, scrolling through more information. "It's not just this one center, sir. There's more." We traced the Foundation's activity. Multiple programs, prosthetic research, family support, housing assistance for wounded operators. All funded through a maze of shell organizations. But every line leads back to her. Robert's throat tightened. Even after vanishing from the record books, Alexandra Rains had not stopped serving. She had simply changed the battlefield. And then John showed him one last entry. A memorial fund. Scholarships for the children of soldiers killed during Operation Silent Thunder. The name hit Robert like ice. Silent Thunder had been one of the darkest operations in memory, a mission that had cost lives, reputations, entire units. He remembered the whispers that Phantom Unit had been destroyed there, erased from history to hide the disaster. And yet here it was, proof that Alexandra Rains had survived, carrying the weight of that operation on her shoulders. Robert leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The image of her rifle firing through the fog returned, steady and unshaken. She had been there. She had saved them. And now she was out there still unseen, fighting for soldiers in a different way. Weeks later, an envelope appeared on Robert's desk. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in clean block letters. Heroism isn't about medals. It's about standing in the gap when others can't. Doing what must be done because it is right, not because anyone will know. It was signed with 2 simple initials, AR. Enclosed was the Viper and Wings patch. Its edges were worn, its colors faded from years in the field. Robert placed it in a small frame and stored it in his locker. Not for display, not for recognition, but as a reminder, one only he and his team would ever understand. The ghost was real, and she was still watching. The envelope with Alexandra Rain's initials lingered in Robert's mind for weeks. Every time he opened his locker and saw the framed patch, he felt a strange mixture of gratitude and unease. Gratitude because she had saved them when no one else could. Unease because she remained nothing more than a shadow, an untouchable figure moving just beyond reach. Robert had spent his career learning that every soldier has a story, but Alexandra's story was one the world had chosen to erase. And yet, she had written herself back into history, not with medals, not with official recognition, but with a single rifle and the quiet strength of someone who refused to disappear. Life inside the unit pressed on. Missions came and went, training cycles repeated, and the men and women of Sabre 6 returned to their routines. But among Robert's team, something had changed. Emma no longer joked about ghost stories. Michael, once the skeptic, cleaned his rifle with a strange reverence, as if he were preparing it under invisible eyes. John wore his grin still, but now it carried a sharper edge, like someone who had seen proof of myths he once mocked. Then, 3 weeks later, intelligence crossed Robert's desk. A report so vague it might have been dismissed by anyone else. A blurred image, captured by a surveillance drone in an undisclosed conflict zone. It showed a lone figure on a ridge. The stance was unmistakable, the rifle balanced perfectly, the scope aligned with patient precision, the barrel tracking as if it could already see the future. The analysts had no confirmation. To them, it was just another shadow on another hill. But Robert knew. The way she stood, the calm in her posture, it was her, Alexandra Rains. By the time anyone tried to verify, the position was empty. She was gone, as if the mountain itself had swallowed her whole. Robert sat with the image long after others dismissed it. He didn't need proof. He didn't need documents or signatures. He knew. Somewhere out there, the phantom sniper was still working, still watching, still shaping battles she would never be credited for. And that realization changed him. Months passed. The missions piled up. Sabre 6 rotated across deserts, jungles, and cities where shadows moved faster than light. Each time they found themselves pressed, when the odds seemed impossible, Robert caught himself glancing toward the horizon. Some part of him always expected her to be there, scope glinting in the sun, ready to fire the single shot that would tip the scales. Sometimes he even thought he heard her voice in the static of the comms, though he knew it was only memory. But the effect was real. His team fought harder, steadier, unafraid, because they believed. And belief was its own weapon. Emma said it best one night, as they sat cleaning rifles under dim light. It's not about whether she's really there. It's about knowing someone like her could be. That's enough to keep you steady when everything else falls apart. Michael nodded, eyes distant. She didn't just save us. She gave us something else. A reason to keep moving, even when it feels like no one's watching. Robert listened, but said nothing. The truth lived in silence. It was months later when Robert received something unexpected. A quiet knock on his door in the barracks. No sender. Just a small, battered package left behind. Inside was a folded piece of canvas, worn at the edges, faintly smelling of smoke and gun oil. When he spread it across his desk, he saw the stitched words, faded but legible. Phantom Unit. No signature, no explanation. Just a relic of a unit that no longer officially existed. For a long moment, Robert sat in silence, running his hand across the rough fabric. Then he carefully folded it again, placed it back inside the package, and locked it away with the patch. 2 tokens of a ghost. 2 reminders of a woman the world had tried to forget. He realized then that he would likely never meet her, never hear her voice outside of the static, never know the full story of Operation Silent Thunder or what it had cost her. But that didn't matter. What mattered was this. Alexandra Rains was still out there. Not for glory, not for medals, not even for recognition. She fought in the shadows, gave her earnings to the wounded and broken, and vanished again before anyone could ask why. Heroism, Robert thought, wasn't measured in medals or parades. It was measured in moments like Stonewall Ridge, moments when someone stood in the gap between life and death and refused to move. Weeks later, on another mission, Sabre 6 found themselves in yet another impossible corner. Outnumbered, pinned down, running low on ammunition. Robert felt the familiar cold dread pressing against his chest. The fog was thick, the enemy clever, the ground unforgiving. And then, one sharp crack split the night. An enemy muzzle flash went dark. Robert didn't hesitate. He didn't question. He simply raised his mic and whispered into it, as if speaking to the mountain itself. Overwatch were listening. The static hissed in reply. But Robert swore he could almost hear her breathing, slow and steady, on the other end. That night, as he lay awake under the stars, Robert understood the truth. Ghosts didn't vanish. They lived on in the men and women who carried their memory, in the belief they sparked, in the battles they shaped without recognition. Alexandra Rains was more than a sniper. She was a reminder of what it meant to fight, not for glory, not for history, but for the ones standing beside you. And somewhere out there, in some nameless valley or forgotten ridge, she was still behind a rifle, watching, waiting, ready to fire the one shot that would change everything.